Hey y'all, these are 5 common mistakes that woodworkers often make when they first start getting into hand planes. Mistake number 1 has to do with buying cheap junk. And it's even worse when you buy junk but it's expensive. So for example, this hunk of garbage right here with the stamped steel frog. Now I'm not going to belabor the point because I've got a video out about Beginner's Guide to Buying Hand Planes, and a bunch of other creators on YouTube have them as well. But the takeaway for this one is do your research before you go out and buy your first plane, so that way you at least know what you're getting yourself into. Mistake number 1, buying cheap junk that is not going to perform up to your expectations. A good rule of thumb to help you avoid mistake number 1 is to stick with a reputable brand. So for example, you've got Sargent, you've got Miller's Falls. Maybe not one with a green knob, but if that's all that you can find, there's worse things out there. Of course, you have Stanley, which is pretty hard to go wrong with a good quality Stanley. But again, do your research on this. Starts with watching videos like this, and then there's a bunch of other ones, as I mentioned before. And then, of course, if you've got the disposable income, it's pretty hard to go wrong with the Lee Nielsen. And now let's get on to mistake number 2. Common mistake number 2 is buying planes that are either cracked, broken, or poorly repaired. Like this one right here. You can see that that's busted up there at the toe. Now, that plane will still function. However, it's not going to be worth paying a decent price for unless you were buying it to take the parts off of it, which of course is the reason why I bought it. A lot of folks will buy planes on eBay. And let me just say that when you're buying a hand plane on eBay, it's like buying a lottery ticket because you don't know what you're going to get until that shows up at your door. And as a rule of thumb, the fewer pictures there are in the listing, the more of a risk you're taking. And so, for example, you might buy a plane that looks halfway decent from the top, especially it's got the blade and the lever cap installed, and then you get it and you flip it over and the bottom looks like that. And of course, you know, an unscrupulous seller is not going to disclose that or show that picture in the ad. And one that's even more annoying than that is when you have the little cracks like you see at the corner of the mouth right there, because that one's even harder to find and it's a lot easier for folks to hide in a picture. So to be clear, I'm not saying don't buy hand planes on eBay. I sell on there too. All I'm saying is just be careful because, again, it's like buying a lottery ticket. Another thing, you know, I talked about the castings being cracked and broken, but these totes can be an issue as well, because if you don't have the savvy to be able to repair that or the disposable income to pay somebody else to repair it, you're going to end up needing to buy another tote or build one. So keep that in mind for that as well. And the reason why I bring that up is because original intact rosewood totes are not cheap. You know, they're hard to find. So you might think you're getting a really good deal on a hand plane for 40 or 50 bucks, and then you go to buy a new tote for it and you find out that that's another $40, and now, you know, you're in the plane for a lot more than you had planned to spend. So mistake number 2, cracked, broken, or badly repaired planes. I probably shouldn't even share this next one because I'm going to mess around and put myself out of business if too many people take heed. But mistake number 3 is buying planes that are incomplete. Buying planes that are missing parts, missing too many parts, to where it's going to cost more to buy those replacement parts than it would be to just buy a complete plane to begin with. The 2 most common offenders here are going to be combination planes like this number 45 right here. It is not uncommon for this to be all there is to the plane, at least when you find it in the wild, and I can assure you that there are a whole bunch of attachments that go with that. So before you go buy a 45, a 50, a 55, make sure that you check out the video. I've got inventory videos that specifically for the number 45 and for the number 50 that you can go through my library and you can find. Or just pull up the illustrated parts breakdown, but see what all's supposed to be there before you drop, you know, 50, 60, 100 bucks on a number 45. And the other really common one I see is the 78, or really any rabbit plane. Could be the 190 series or 180 series. You see these all the time. Frequently they'll be priced from anywhere from $2 to $25, and they're so commonly missing their attachments. So like this fence setup right here, with the rod and with the set screw, and then the depth stop that goes on this side, and then the special depth stop screw. It is incredibly common for these parts to cost more than what you paid for the body. And that's, you know, hoping that it's actually got the blade and the lever cap, which this one doesn't have on it right now. So whenever possible, try to avoid buying incomplete planes. Or if you are going to buy an incomplete plane, you know, preferably one that's only missing a couple parts versus one that's missing almost everything. So that was number 3. And just remember, when in doubt, pull up the illustrated parts breakdown, go on eBay, you know, do a quick search and look for parts for the plane that you're considering buying, and price out those parts before you throw down a bunch of money on an incomplete plane. That brings us to common mistake number 4. Misstep number 4 has to do with buying outdated stuff that you as a beginner are not going to be able to get working, at least not the way that you're going to want it to. Starting out with old planes like the ones that I've got here is like learning how to drive on a 100-year-old car with rotten tires, that brakes that are about worn out, and before they even had power steering. That's not how you want to learn how to drive. Same thing with hand planes. It is not uncommon to have the mouth completely blown out like that, and I cannot express to you how important the mouth is on these old fellas, and just stuff like that. I mean, that one's just obnoxiously bad. You do not want to start out with these unless you are specifically trying to emulate, you know, 17th, 18th century, even early 19th century woodworkers. And if that's the case, then I highly recommend that you find a mentor that can get you started. So I guess the more appropriate way to sum it up would be, if you're going to get started with something like this, know what you're getting yourself into and have someone there to guide you along the process to get you started. I mean, you can really kind of combine the first couple things about overpaying for incomplete planes, which most of these are, and, you know, maybe sprinkle in a little bit of the cheap junk rule. It's a good idea to avoid these when you're first starting out. Common mistake number 5, I hinted at it earlier, is not doing enough research. So join the Can I Have It auction group on Facebook if you're on Facebook. Join our hand tools on Reddit if you're on Reddit. You know, stay here on YouTube and check out my videos. Check out Wood by Wright. Check out Paul Sellers. Check out Rex Kruger. You know, learn all you can before you go and buy your first plane. There's an up-and-coming guy here on YouTube called Batcave Creations. Check him out. He's been doing a lot of comparisons, especially between vintage planes and new-made stuff. And last and most certainly not least, pick up a copy of the Anarchist Tool Chest, because this book will get you steered in the right direction when it comes to hand planes and when it comes to just hand tools in general.